Welcome everybody, and thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Marina Gerner. I'm the founder of AthenaDAO. And AthenaDAO is the organization having ADLabs pop up. It's a month of activations in the city of San Francisco focused on women's health. So today is our third one, and I'm very honored to have with me the author of what the Financial Times has called a book to read this month, The Vagina Business.
Thank you.
Yes. You can clap on saying vagina here as many times as you want. Marina Gerner is here from the UK for this weekend for this book launch here in the US, and very glad that you're all here. That you are all here with us tonight. For who knows what AthenaDAO does here? Oh, maybe 6 people. Just for those. I'm hearing somebody's popcorn crackling, and it's going to actually be recorded. So if you cannot, thank you. I really appreciate it. For those who don't know what AthenaDAO does, is we fund scientific research focused on women's health. I didn't know until 4 years ago that only 10% of the NIH budget goes into female-specific conditions. You hear about biopharma caring too much about people taking medication. Well, when it comes to women's health, the R&D spent on female-specific conditions is only 1%. As of McKinsey, I think, published that 3 years ago. Maybe it went up to 2%. And most of it is focused in oncology, breast cancer. So when you think of that, we're half of the world's population. In the US and across the world, mostly we represent 80% of the consumer spending, so it doesn't compute. The reason why when you go to the doctor, he says, I don't know, or it's just, you're just a woman. And when he says they don't know, they mean it, they don't know. We haven't done the research. Things like endometriosis still don't have a diagnostic that is non-invasive. PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, is also a problem that we don't have a solution for. Lifestyle is not enough. We need diagnostics, we need treatments, we need things that can actually make a big difference. And what we do at AthenaDAO is fund the research that could get us there. But research takes a long time. So it's very hard for the people that know us to get the connection between their lives today and the research tomorrow. So one of the reasons we did the ADLabs pop-up is to show some of the products that have made it from lab into a consumer product. And that's why it's so interesting to also have this perspective, which is a business and startup perspective, into how to get more products to market. Anything that you do to support us means one more research that we could potentially fund. So hopefully all of you walk away with wanting to join our community, get any of the swag out there on the table. Everything helps. And more importantly, with the notion that you need to be the voice of change. And if we want more innovation, more VC spend in women's health and all of that, it means that a lot of us have to be a little bit louder. But that was my intro today for what we do. And I'm gonna let actually Marina introduce herself, and then we're gonna have a little chat about her book, because that's what we're here for. Marina, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure. That was actually a perfect introduction for why I wrote the book, because as we know, women's health has been under-researched and underfunded for too long, and I wanted to give people a roadmap, something that they could look at to see femtech innovation across various stages of life. So I've interviewed 100 people for this book who are entrepreneurs, researchers, investors, and other leaders in the femtech space, to show people what is possible if femtech is done well. So it's a book of solutions, if you will, and it's a book to point to and refer to when someone says, oh, what about femtech? Like, can you tell me more? What's the business case? Why does it matter? Why is it important? That's what the book is here for.
So in reading the book, I found something that is I'm going to read the quote because I posted it today on Twitter. I'm obsessed with the app, sorry. And it really shook me. It's in the book. But I love because I use the NIH data point. I love when I talk about women's health. But the big thing is context, right? So everybody heard about the robo-taxi this week, right? Ooh, autonomous cars. Here in San Francisco, it's all about AI. AGI, we're there. But, so the spectrum with the duck beak, which is used to do pap smears, hasn't changed much since 1870. If it was the automotive industry, we would still be riding a horse-drawn carriage wearing a fetching bonnet. So, this is so true, right? Anyway, it's out of Marina's book, and can you contextualize why this was an important message to get across in your book?
Absolutely. So many of the devices that we're using for female bodies, are really old. So something that really shocked me is when you go into the hospital today to give birth, you'll be offered the epidural, right? And the epidural was popularized in the 1950s. There's no other area of technology where we take something from the 1950s and we say, wow, look, this is the best we got. Look at this incredible floppy disk, right? We don't say that. But unfortunately, that's the case with things like the epidural or, forceps, for example, which looks like salad forks, right? Or vacuum delivery, which is basically a toilet plunger. So these birth instruments need an update. That's one of the things that brought me to the space, because when I started researching for this book, I was in my early 30s. I knew I wanted to have children soon. And I also knew that 9 in 10 first-time mothers have a birth injury. 9 in 10 first-time mothers, right? That's a shocking statistic. And I wanted to avoid that. So I was looking into the space and I found a company called Materna Medical. Have you heard of it? They're creating a device, a very simple dilator that pre-stretches the vaginal canal in the first stage of labor, just like you would stretch your muscles before you're working out. It pre-stretches the muscles so that when the baby comes through, hopefully you're less likely to experience tearing, and hopefully it can also prevent pelvic organ prolapse later down the line. So they're not on the market yet. They're in clinical trials. So we'll see if it works or not. But I really like the sound of this device because it's kind of simple. It's not very invasive. It's a dilator, and we use dilators in other areas of women's health. So I spoke to the CEO, Tracy McNeil, and I learned that the epidural is very old. And I also learned that anyone with a vagina-centric innovation struggles to raise money because the majority of venture capital investors are male. And as one of them said it, I have a quote in the book, one of them said, "I don't want to talk about vaginas in my Monday morning partner meeting." Right, so in other words, I don't want to talk about vaginas in front of other men in a business setting. And that really infuriated me, to think that the reason we don't get the kind of innovation that we need and obviously deserve is because there's a bunch of guys in a boardroom somewhere being embarrassed to talk about vaginas. So yeah.
So speaking of the vagina, it was your book, it was your article in Wire magazine where the title had the word vagina. Sorry, it's a bit dry here. Can someone pass me a little glass of water, Jenna? That went viral, that led to this book.
That's right.
So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, exactly. So when I heard this quote, I don't want to talk about vaginas in my Monday morning partner meeting. And it's something this sentiment is something I kept hearing from various founders, not just from one person, but I kept hearing it again and again across different parts, like vaginal dryness in menopause, for example. Again, you're creating a device to address a symptom of menopause.
Now we know why they put the bottles of water right
on the table.
Please go ahead.
No, that's all. So it was something I saw across the board in fertility, birth, menopause. And I was really angry, so I wrote this article called "We Need to Talk About Investors' Problem with Vaginas," and it went viral, and it really hit a nerve with people. And suddenly I was getting messages from Cindy Gallup, and it was just an interesting experience. And it allowed me to put together a book proposal and to have a business case, because writing a book is quite similar to launching a startup in that you need to put together a minimum viable product, you need to have a proof of concept, you need to find an agent and publishers, and they're all similar to finding investors. So how did I get here? Yeah, that's how the article led to the book.
I guess your publisher thought it was the right moment, and specifically there had been so much interest from the viral article.
Yes, exactly. Or that's what I told them, and I think they believed it. Although they had some concerns, every publisher I spoke to, not just the publisher I'm with now, but every publisher I spoke to told me, this is a great book, but are you sure about the title? Right? Every person said this to me. Because publishing is a business after all, and you have a sales team within the publishing house that sells books to a team of buyers at Barnes & Noble and at independent bookstores and so on. So they worried that the sales team would get embarrassed, and if they don't pitch it well, bookstores may not buy it. I was also told that some independent bookstores may not display it or may not promote it, that people will be embarrassed by it. But I insisted. I always said, look, that's the whole point. I wrote this book because I want to destigmatize the conversation. I want to normalize the word in a business setting. And so it was really important for me to have the name on the cover. And it's also just, that is the name of the book. But my publisher said, okay, can you come up with some alternative titles? We're going to test them on a target audience. So I came up with 16 other titles. I called 2 of my best friends and I said, oh my God, I need more titles, help me. And we came up with titles like, When Women Are Well.
That sounds like ChatGPT.
Yeah, I know. This was like just before ChatGPT, so yeah, I'm sure it would have suggested that too. And the publisher tested all of these 16 titles on our target audience, and guess which title won? The Vagina Business.
Well, it comes at you. You can't avoid it. And it's in you. I mean, it's because people are not used to hearing the word vagina, and it's not. Just for context, when we published the newsletter with your interview last week, Substack did not allow me to tag the word vagina. So that's how it is. I remember last year when we were trying to do an AI animation for ovaries, I said to somebody, can you try Midjourney, because she uses it all the time, ovaries. It was blocked. So ovaries, that is like a scientific term that Midjourney would not allow you to use. So it's interesting how women's bodies, parts of their bodies, parts that are anatomically correct to actually name, we're not allowed to use them for things like newsletter tagging or in AI for actually illustrating it.
Yeah, absolutely. Or on social media, like on Meta. I've had founders tell me that the founder of a platform called Rosie, they put up an ad about sex education, and it was banned because it was deemed too political. And another company told me that they can't put vagina in any of their ads. Instead, they say V. This is for your V. I'm sure there are people who wonder, like, V? What is this? Isn't V for Vendetta?
I mean, everybody who works in the industry talks about. Cindy Gallup has talked about the struggle for her own platform.
Yeah.
Whether it is sex toys, sex tech, or other things. I mean, I just think the ovaries part is shocking. But
yeah, the ovaries. Yeah.
So I
didn't expect that, but it's still not too surprising. I've had since the book came out, when I was looking for a book launch venue in London, there was a place that told me, no, sorry, we can't host a book launch, just purely based on the title. They didn't read the book or anything. I also had another author say to me, I don't want to write an endorsement, I don't want to be associated with this, I don't want to put my work out in that way, so yeah. It's 2024, and yet, yeah.
The business of being a woman. Speaking of business, to me, so I started my career in the fashion industry, and I did trend reports for LVMH. So I remember doing all their sales data and what go-to-market strategies people use. I mean, the man is one of the richest men in the world from companies that sell products to women, because the beauty industry and the fashion luxury industry is mostly women. I know there's now men in the game, but back in the day when he bought his very first company was Dior in the 1980s, and back in then it only sold dresses to women. So it's crazy that we are so monitored and kind of not allowed to say these things, and yet women make so many consumer decisions. So there's a chapter for investing, and it's a really big topic for everybody in some SF Tech Week that, there was like a women's health panel. Investing is always an issue. What was the most interesting thing that you learned from interviewing all these investors that struck you as an important thing?
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the beauty industry. So research shows us that female founders are more likely to raise money in the beauty and fashion industries because they're considered gender congruent. Whereas if you're running a condom business or something in engineering, which a lot of femtech is, it's less likely to be considered that, so you're less likely to raise money. So when you're a femtech founder, you're facing biases from sort of two directions. One is the stigma that people don't want to deal with, and the other one is that you're potentially with something like condoms in an industry, or with sex toys in an industry that is male dominated. So it's an interesting two-way bias. But yeah, VC is huge in the tech world. But what's really interesting, actually, if you look at the number of companies overall, if you look at all companies, what percentage of companies do you think receives VC funding? Does anyone have a guess?
Did you say for women's?
No, just like if you look at all companies in the US, the percentage of companies that has some VC funding, has received VC funding overall.
Oh, I just know the women's. It's only 1%.
Oh yeah, that's out of the VC funding, but beyond, looking at all companies. Shout out the number, anyone.
Oh, like 5%.
5%?
30?
30? Yeah, it's 0.25.
Oh, shit. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's actually a really small percentage, but there's so much attention on it because out of all the companies that have gone public, for example, some 42% were venture-backed. So the ones that are on our mind and, the ones that you see on TV, those are venture-backed. And venture-backed companies also account for something like 80% of R&D spending. So they play a really big, disproportionate role in innovation, which is why this really matters when it comes to femtech. And so the issue there is that 90% of VC investors are men who are embarrassed, but they also don't have skin in the game in the same way, right? So we think of investors as these rational human beings who use metrics to look at a business case and then they make a rational decision. But in reality, we're all quite emotional when it comes to finance, as we know from behavioral economics, and investors are no different from that. So in the book, I tell the story of how I went to a press dinner, and there was an investor next to me who was telling me that he invested in dog food and how incredible this dog food company is. Because even when the economy goes down, people still want to buy food for their beloved pets. And, this company is resilient, it will do really well. And then he goes up to go to the bathroom, and his colleague says to me, ever since he got a puppy, he's been talking about this dog food company. So that just shows you how personal, it's an anecdote, but it is quite personal. People invest in the things that they want to use for themselves. So you've got to have skin in the game. which is why we need more female VC investors.
Bernard Arnault didn't have to wear a dress to know selling Dior was a good business. And that's what I say to people. That has anybody heard the expression being based? They use it a lot in the tech world. And I say that men that invest in women's health are very based because they don't need to wear the outfit, or they don't need it to actually see a good business. I think we have to counter a lot of that. There was a Guardian article that came out last week. I'll be the first person to tell you I never use the poor women or this is because of our rights or anything when I talk to investors. I talk about how it's a massive business opportunity. In 10 years, this is going to be a case study. Why didn't we not put money in this earlier? Because whoever figures out diagnostics for endometriosis, whoever figures out another solution for menopause, all these things that are going to happen, they're going to make so much money. It's going to be stupid. And so I appeal to greed, and I don't call it greed because I think greed is bad, but I appeal to capitalism because in the end, women make this capitalistic decisions with their money. We buy the shoes we want, the clothes for the baby you want, the best for our faces, everything, that we're not being given these things every day for like our health. It's insane because imagine if you knew you could, for women that have endometriosis, if they knew a diagnostic that wouldn't make them go through 8 operations, they would do anything to have it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've interviewed a founder who's working on exactly that, a non-invasive endometriosis test. And there are several companies that are working on that at the moment. But I think it's interesting what you said about being based, like not having to be the one who wears the dress. Because what founders hear from investors a lot is, let me go home and ask my wife. Right? That's a phrase that comes up a lot. And it's so mind-boggling because if you're investing in space, it's not like you say, let me go ask an astronaut.
Let me go to call NASA.
Yeah. Plus, you wouldn't make the decision about a business case based on the opinion of one person. Typically, you would look at, the figures, the unmet need, the total addressable market, all of these things. But there is this hidden hurdle of relatability that female founders face and women face more broadly in other areas. Female cartoon characters have to be relatable, unlike male cartoon characters. But in the femtech space, it helps if an investor has some personal experience through a family member or a friend, and that just shouldn't be the case, but it is still the case.
You even mentioned you go through the investor chapter on that research that men get the promotion questions and women get the, what do you call them?
Yeah, the prevention.
The prevention questions.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have a quick story before, very fast on this. What we do at AthenaDAO, there's other organizations like us, but they do it in other areas. We do women's health. We have brother organizations that do it on cryopreservation, longevity, and neuroscience. And I know that we speak to the same investors, so sometimes some of them come that I know they put money on the cryopreservation one, which is, basically a very moonshot type of this thing. They're like, well, I just don't know how to do DD in women's health. And I just sit there and thinking to myself, you're telling me that you know how to do DD in cryopreservation? It's just, investors also make it's their money. They're going to put it on whatever they believe in. And femtech does have, or women's health, biotech, all that touches women's health has a very big mountain to climb. Mm-hmm. What is from having talked to so many investors and moving up, so we moved away from the funding, what is something that you think was the thing that they told, was there any recommendation or anything that what companies in this space could be doing for this to change? Not even the women themselves, but...
Yeah, I think for investors, look at it as a business case. If you're not a some might say, I'm not a gynecologist, I'm not a woman, so you can hire someone to help you with that. It's very common to have an advisor to help you look into a business. So that's a very simple solution. And I have a list in the money chapter where I've interviewed a really cool investor who's invested in tampons, like sustainable tampons. And he talks about the internal exercises they have done at their fund and how it has changed the way in which they invest. So it's a very a good list of bullet points. You know, just for example, tracking how many female founders they've spoken to, reaching out to new networks to find people in unusual places, right? Because in some ways, femtech founders are less traditional. They may not be serial entrepreneurs because oftentimes they've encountered a problem themselves, and so they want to solve something that, you know, they have experienced or faced. That's very common. You'd be very hard pressed to find somebody who doesn't have a personal motivation in the space. So it might be a bit harder to find those people, but it's definitely not impossible.
There's a lot of money in the world. It's just we have to ask 10 times more than maybe other people, but it is there.
Yeah.
Something that I wanted to ask, because you have a newborn baby. Yes. And thank you so much for coming. It's nice for you to take a little break, but I also realized that he's back in London.
Yes.
I'm curious because you researched this book for 2 years. Now that you have a newborn baby, do you have like a favorite femtech innovation that's been very helpful? Anything that was a surprise to you? Yeah. And now that you're having to use some of these innovations yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't appreciated how intense breastfeeding is. It's like you're turning into this milk-making machine, 24/7. So just before our talk, I was pumping some milk actually, because I have to pump every 5 hours, including in the middle of the night. Otherwise my boobs will explode, or it'll be very painful, and you don't want to risk that. Plus it has to be kind of on the similar schedule that I would usually be feeding the baby. So yeah, I'm very dependent on this breast pump. It's my travel companion. And that's something I wrote about as well, and that's really helpful for me now. What else? So I'm here for the shortest possible trip. I arrived last night and I'm flying back tomorrow. Which is not something I would do if I didn't have a baby. I'd spend more time in San Francisco. But I really wanted to come to this event. And it's super nice to be here. I've slept better than I have the whole year. Nobody's waking me up at night. And, I'm jet lagged, but I feel okay because I've had interrupted sleep for such a long time. I don't even know what normal sleep is anymore.
You have the bed to yourself, and then you're also, that's amazing. You wrote about it, but I want you to talk about your favorite innovations that you found, and specifically there's a chapter called research.
Oh, yes.
Yes. I mean, my favorite thing is talking about research, women's health research, but tell me about the bra.
Yeah, I'll tell you all about the bra. So that's one of the origin stories for the book as well, which happened about 5 years ago. I went to a conference and I learned something new, which many people still don't know, which is if I ask you to imagine someone who's having a heart attack, who do you visualize? And the likelihood is most of us think of an old man. That's who we tend to see in movies, right? And the symptoms that you think of are a lot of pressure on the chest and pain radiating down the left-hand side. But those are actually symptoms that are typical for men, not for women. So female symptoms are considered atypical, and they're more likely to include things like long-term extreme fatigue, and it can even include jaw pain. And women are less likely to describe the pressure on the chest as pain, more likely to describe it as discomfort. So there are differences in how we talk about these things. But historically, most of our medical understanding has been based on the male body. And so as a result, women are 50% more likely to be misdiagnosed after having a heart attack. We also wait longer to call for help, and so on. And so I'm a journalist, and I was really excited to come across a company called Bloomer Tech. Do you know this? Do people know the company?
My friend actually launched this company. Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Alicia?
Yes. Yeah. She's
Yeah.
actually my senior from the MIT same master's program. But
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I met Alicia Chong Rodriguez, the founder, 5 years ago at a conference. And what they've created is a smart bra. So a bra that women at risk can wear to track their heart health. And I thought this is so cool because not only is there a problem, but there's also a solution and people who are working on something new. So I really wanted to write about her. I was at this conference, I was sitting, one of those balcony seats. And then it was the lunch break and I ran downstairs and I caught her in the corridor and I said, I want to write about you. She gave me her business card. And I went home and I pitched all of my editors. So I write for various publications like the Times of London and Wired Magazine and The Guardian. And there was nothing in my inbox. Nobody was interested. It was just tumbleweeds. And I was told it's a little bit niche. This was a while. This was pre-COVID. But if you work in women's health, it's quite likely somebody at some point said, oh, it's a bit of a niche idea, even though it does apply to over 50% of the population. And then COVID happened, and I think a few things shifted during COVID. One of them, this may be a cynical take, but if you think back to the start of COVID, you may remember that men had worse symptoms than women. So nowadays, women are more likely to have long COVID, but initially, men had worse symptoms. And so if you were to be cynical, you could say suddenly people started to pay attention because men were more affected by it. We thought more about the sex differences in health. And people, the relationship between physicians and patients changed because of testing as well. We trusted people to test themselves at home, and that's a big part of what femtech does too. So suddenly there was more attention on this, and I managed to write the story about the smart bra. It came out in The Guardian, and I was invited, as a result of the story, I was invited to chair a panel at Women of Wearables. Women of Wearables? Yeah. They had one of their first femtech conferences online, and I chaired a panel there in the morning, and I ended up staying for the whole conference. I was just so fascinated by women's health. I was really drawn into this space because you think you know about your own body, right? Like, it's your body. But in reality, there's so much more that we can learn, and so much more that I've learned by writing this book. It has really taught me a lot, and I hope you gain as much from reading it as I have gained from writing it.
Speaking of women not being aware of so much of their bodies, I mean, one thing that we've encountered with AthenaDAO specifically is women, when they're thinking about their fertility, one thing, thinking when they're older, egg freezing, all the things they have to go through, the resources, everything else. And then the one thing that I feel no one prepares us for is menopause. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this generation is changing a lot because of social media. There's a lot of conversations where perimenopause is coming up. Menopause is a huge topic. What was one of the things that you found interesting in the years of research in terms of the menopause space and the innovation there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think menopause is probably the biggest femtech market of all, just because of the demographics, right, and that particular group and their characteristics. Plus, all women go through menopause. Not all women give birth or decide to have children, right? But all women do go through menopause. And I think many of us who still have years or a few years until perimenopause are perhaps in denial. That's my sense. And what's also interesting is that there are 34 different symptoms, at least, of menopause. So there are many individual variations. And anecdotally, I feel when I started this research, So over 3 years ago now, like somewhere 3 to 5 years ago, nobody was using the term perimenopause, whereas now people tend to know about it. And at the time, hardly anyone was talking about endometriosis. Whereas nowadays, at least anecdotally, I feel like I can sit in a coffee shop somewhere and I can hear people talk about endometriosis. So a lot has changed in terms of the awareness and the knowledge that people have about these issues. And I think that's very encouraging.
Well, before we do, since the author is here, I think it's a great opportunity for everybody who came to actually also ask you questions. So if anyone has a burning question, please.
My name is Ariel. I'm actually a femtech founder as well. It's an app for cycle tracking, but also it's a comprehensive PMDD management platform. And not very many people know about PMDD. And I agree that in the last few years, I hear conversation around women's health on topics of endometriosis, things like that we talked about. Have you heard of PMDD? Is that something that's on your radar as well?
Yes, and there was an article in the Washington Post recently about it.
And Cosmopolitan UK, we were actually featured in that.
Yeah. Amazing.
But yeah, so, but I was just curious, like in the space, are you hearing about PMDD, like people you spoke with at the
No,
book or
it didn't come up at the time.
Okay.
But I feel like more recently, in the last few weeks especially,
Yeah.
I've heard more about it.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, we're happy to hear that there's awareness spreading on that too. I was
Yeah.
curious from your point of view, interviewing so many people, but
Yeah, what have you found as an expert in the space?
in which
In the PMDD, like do you feel like it's shifting into the public consciousness?
I would say within the last year, I've noticed a significant uptick in conversation. And my personal self, I have the disorder as well, so I have a really strong connection to it. Kind of like you were saying, we tend to go for things we experienced. And doctors within the last 6 months, I've noticed, have been more aware of it. I've never even had a doctor know what it was until 6 months ago, except for a psychiatrist, but they were well versed in it. And that was hard to find even. So, but I've noticed an uptick, in awareness.
Well, it's amazing. You're working on something.
Thank you. Yeah, we're the first ones. We'll see how it goes, but yeah.
Yeah. What's your company called?
It's Red Tent PMDD.
Great. Yeah, for anyone who's interested. Red Tent.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, I have more questions.
You
Go
can also
ahead.
ask me privately later if you want.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This is both of you actually. This is really informative. A burning question I had is when it comes to specifically women's health, if we're relating to reproductive health, we can say there's FemTech, there's new innovations like this, like events like this, what we're talking about. But in the example that you brought up earlier, in like cardiac care or anything else that affects the woman body, the female body, how do you make a push for that? Just because in the preclinical setting, whether it's oncology or anything else that affects women, for example, in my experience in academia and both industry, I've seen people that have a preference for like samples for men. And we have a running joke that like people think that the female body is just like a smaller version of the adult male body. But in industries like that, or in settings like that, where it's not really up to the female scientist, the female founder, because it's something that's already been established and already like, if you think about heart attacks, or if you think about like, I don't know, lung cancer or something, it's something that's already established. But how do you make a push for that to prioritize the female body as a thing of its own and not like an extension of a male body? Because it is different. Like having a uterus and a vagina does make a difference in how you are going to react to medication, to diagnostics. So that's just a thought I had. If it's something that you've come across writing your book.
Absolutely. In the research chapter, especially, because the bias starts really early with animal studies as well. Female mice are unfortunately still excluded a lot of the time. And
They're more expensive actually as well.
Yeah, exactly. And they could potentially interfere with like your neat results. And researchers come up with a lot of creative excuses for this thing. So I've interviewed Professor Wojtowicz, and she said some researchers who excluded female mice said, oh, we didn't include them because their cages were harder to clean. That's something they actually wrote in a paper.
Wow.
You know, it's yeah, it still happens, unfortunately, but of course we're not smaller versions of men, and women's health is often defined as things that affect us, you know, differently or disproportionately or solely like periods, disproportionately like bone health, differently like heart health. But in reality, the more you look into women's health, or I found the more I've looked into it, the more I've realized there's actually nothing gender neutral. You know, everything is interconnected, and our hormones and our metabolism. So everything has to be seen through that lens. And there is a silver lining or an optimistic statistic that I have found, which is if in a journal article, in an academic study, if the first author is female and if the last author is female, in other words, if the two most important authors of a paper are female, they're much more likely to disaggregate by sex. They are, if I remember correctly, 26 times more likely to analyze the data in that way. So, you know, it's female researchers who are saying, hang on, isn't there something we should be considering here? And that applies to absolutely everything, you know, including Ozempic, for example. I write a newsletter as well about women's health and innovation, and I wrote about Ozempic recently because there were all these stories online about Ozempic babies and women saying that they got pregnant when they were taking Ozempic, even though they're on the pill or had fertility issues previously. And so there was a question of like, can Ozempic boost your fertility? You know, what's going on? And scientists have a few potential explanations. One of them is that it changes, if you're on the pill, it changes the way it's absorbed, so it lowers the concentration of the pill, and that could potentially get someone pregnant. Or for those who had irregular cycles, you know, losing weight, being on Ozempic had potentially, it could reestablish your cycles. So this is huge, but they're only now beginning to actually look into this, right? It's again an afterthought, like female bodies. Oh yeah, by the way, you might get pregnant. That's that. Any other questions?
I just wanted to answer that. If you're in academia, it's very important that you actually, as a person in academia, advocate for this. At AthenaDAO, I always say, if you want to support women's health, come join our community. Let people know what we're doing, because we really do fund translational research at labs. But in our first reproductive health report, we had a very famous researcher, Polina Lishko. She wrote something that she pointed to me that a lot of researchers don't stay studying women's health or areas of research that impact female-specific conditions, because in academia, you're going to go for things that bring you prestige or money. And you have to be a masochist to stay in women's health. I do this because I feel that now. You know, you're not getting everybody throwing money at you. You say women's health and the person walks away from you. I assume in San Francisco, like that's like AI, oh my God, tell me more. You say women's health, what? Okay, bye. Yeah. But it starts in academia where you make your choices, right? So that career path, we need more people researching ovarian aging. Speaking of ovarian aging, we have a panel here on Tuesday about that. So anybody who wants to know about menopause, we have like these stars of the space here for the panel. So ovarian aging, another thing that I spent a lot of time in the longevity space, and a lot of the young minds in the longevity space do a lot to inbound people, get researchers to think about longevity. You actually need to get people to think about women's health. You're in a lab, you could be looking, maybe there's something that you can tangentially do. We have to get a bit more nitty-gritty about things. So there's so much that you can do yourself anywhere you are, because if you speak about it as a thing, it becomes a thing. So that's the big thing. Speaking it is like the hottest thing ever.
Yeah, and tell people the statistics you showed me about dogs and longevity.
Yeah, I should. I did show you that.
Yeah.
A friend of mine did this longevity funding thing, and we've used it on our pitch decks and presentations because it shows you how reproductive longevity is second last and only after pets. So my dog, which I'm very happy, might live longer, but women, reproductive longevity, ovarian aging is second last in funding in venture capital VC funding.
Yeah.
And that goes from like this to, you know how that infamous like, so the crazy part is we all, you know, every woman has ovaries, and as you said, we're not all going to have kids, but everyone's going to have menopause. And ovarian aging is exactly, you know, the research of the companies or anything is that. And the crazier thing is that this is the doctor that's going to be here on Tuesday, Dr. Jennifer Garrison. She goes around telling people the ovaries is a great model to study longevity because longitudinally they don't live long. You can do everything on the ovaries. You know, it's like, hey, cellular reprogramming, ovaries. No, they're like, no, not interested. It's, it is what it is, but talking about it all the time and saying, let's do more, it's a big thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it really is the key to longevity, and there are some really interesting trials that are happening right now to prolong ovarian function. So yeah, it's definitely a space to watch.
And somebody else had a question, yes.
Hi, I'm Mehek. I'm a grad student at California College of Arts. I'm studying user experience design. You mentioned, so like for women in particular, there's changes and evolvement happening like right from when we're at a very young age. You know, learning about good touch, bad touch, learning about periods, then you come to your teenage years, bodies evolving, and then of course going down pregnancy, menopause. There's also a case of where like, say if you go through some disease like a cancer, then there's forced menopause, which is like a different experience in itself. So out of all these different aspects that a woman's body experiences throughout its lifespan, in your experience, which one would you say needs the most attention and has the least amount of awareness, and has like provided we give it that, it could have a huge impact as a woman?
Mm-hmm. There's a chart in the introduction. Here it is. I don't know if you can see from here, but it shows which areas of female health receive, you know, more attention than others if we look at the number of femtech companies. And so the ones that receive a lot of attention are menstruation, fertility, sexual wellness, and the ones that receive some of the least, where you can hardly see
ovarian
health, cardiovascular, abortion, urinary health, breast health. Yeah. So I refer you to page in the introduction.
You had a question.
Yeah, hi, I'm Nikita. I'm also working on a startup focused on women's hormonal health. I've had PCOS myself. My question to you is, what is the reason? Like, I've gone to like 5 different gynecologists. They keep prescribing you birth control pills. Given there is so much of research out there, how harmful it could be for your overall hormonal health in the long game, even like leading to infertility or causing certain cancers and heart diseases. From your understanding of this, why do you think the medical prescription or the treatment is not changing, given there's so much research now out there? Just an open conversation.
Yeah, it's a big one. A lot of femtech founders cite coming off the pill or not wanting to be on hormonal contraception as their reason for why they've created what they've created. Like the founder of INE, for example, just based in Berlin, they have, it looks like a headphone case. And what you do is you lick a stick in the morning and it measures your progesterone level, so you can track your cycle that way, and use it, potentially as a fertility awareness-based method of contraception. So it is something that comes up a lot. I've also included quite a lot of research in the contraception chapter on the pros and cons of hormonal contraception and on some of the research that has come out on it. Especially in Scandinavia, they have some really large-scale studies on the risks. But what's a bit difficult is that there's no consensus in the academic world. So you have one big study that says, yes, it slightly increases the risk of depression in a certain group of young women. But then you have another study, also from Scandinavia, that says the opposite. And they're both done on, millions of people. They're observational studies, so they're not randomized controlled trials, which have also been done. And those show that it can decrease overall well-being. But it's very nuanced once you look into it. But I do think that it does seem to be pushed too easily or recommended too easily to women at very young ages, especially.
There's no other solution either. That's why.
There is actually.
I mean, there's not, but not that is. What is the standard of care is what becomes de facto, and that's what I hear for a lot of women. It's like, problem, the pill, PCOS, the pill, endo, the pill, and it's just become a de facto. Like, okay, this is what the standard of care is.
Yeah.
I think which is why I started working on it since the last 5 months. We are creating a completely non-medicinal care plan. I've gone to dietitians and gym trainers that give you a very generic fat loss or calorie constrained diet plans, which also will not really solve for the root cause or the triggers for your specific hormonal issues, be it like PCOS, endometriosis, or like even menopause or perimenopause. So
for the solution, are you talking about like a lifestyle change solution? Because
it's
there's
more of a lifestyle solution.
Oh yeah, but that's still there's no solution because there's no treatment. There's no there's nothing that actually takes away the fibroids or anything like that. So that would be a solution.
I actually have my co-founder who had endometriosis. She had such excruciating pain that it would lead to nausea, vomiting, headaches, and everything. She followed cycle thinking method. It actually eliminated some of the very difficult symptoms, including vomiting, nausea, and the amount of pain. So there are some like natural solutions that people are now like focusing more on.
I know, but imagine men had to naturally figure out how to have their dicks work when they don't work instead of Viagra, right? Like naturally stand up for 2 hours, like upside down, to figure out if you can get blood flow into there so you can actually perform. So it's imagine we ask for men to do that when that happens instead of a pill. I'm not saying that we should be pumping pills to make things happen, but it shouldn't just be lifestyle solutions eventually. It should be something that also help, because women have to dedicate so much time to actually being healthy already, and on top of that for conditions that, never mind if I have that one little bit of chocolate because it's going to flare me up to my bed for weeks. That's not right either. But I get you, the lifestyle solutions are nice.
I think the long-term solution is really, according to me, like the lifestyle, because I've actually gone through so many, like, I've tried like 100 plus different solutions over the last 7 years of my PCOS journey. But it's about making the lifestyle solutions very easy to implement in the everyday life, which is why we're like personalizing the care plans based on like 25 plus different factors, including the busy lifestyle or ethnicity or different stuff. Right?
Yeah. Have you looked into Citizen Endo? The Fendo app. It focuses on endometriosis, and it was created by a professor at Columbia University. I think she has something like 30,000 users on the app where people track their symptoms, and then they could look at what is helping others, and they could potentially try that. So with endometriosis, she has found that exercise can help a certain group of people. But it's interesting because they are the ones who habitually exercise. So it's not necessarily causation. You know, people who know that exercise might help them might already be exercising to address their symptoms, for instance. And she also tracks nutrition, because there is a link between nutrition and inflammation. So yes, there are small tweaks people can make, but I think what you're saying is true. You know, we need much better solutions. We can't just tell women, oh, go journal. We need
options. We need options. Like,
Yeah.
I think there should be something for everyone.
Yeah.
I say this about menopause. I haven't had, I guess women that have had PCOS and endometriosis are much more keenly aware of their bodies, and they're dealing with this every day. So for women that haven't had that, I think for me the menopause thing is a big thing, because there's such a huge divide, specifically in the UK now. They're the whole HRT thing.
Yeah.
But if you want to patchouli and do yoga for your menopause, you should. But if you want to take HRT, you should. And if we find more solutions, you should have the options. What we don't have is options.
Exactly.
And that's what we need to fight for, options. So that every woman can be serviced. No woman should be telling another woman what you should be doing, not policing each other on our choices. But just give us the options, right? Choice and options, which
Exactly.
they always want to take away from us.
Exactly. Yeah. I might want to do yoga. You might want the drugs.
Yes, I'm like, give me the drugs. But there should be something for everyone. That's the big thing.
100%. Exactly.
I'm going to actually let now Marina take the questions by herself, so that everybody can go have a drink and continue chatting and meeting, because she's still gonna she has an amazing stamps that she got made. Whoever has the book, she's gonna still do some signings. If anybody still wants the book, we do have some for sale. They're the same price as on Amazon. But you get your tote bag if you get it here with us. And speaking of tote bags, thank you so much for coming. You get your little AthenaDAO swag.
Thank
Please
you.
wear it everywhere. And
I will.
Everybody.
Thank you. I was
We have
hoping I'd
a
get
really fun hat inside. It's for us it's the Fertility Accelerate, but you can call it Femtech Accelerate. You know how in the tech world in San Francisco it's all about EAC or AAC, I cannot even keep it up. Femtech Accelerate.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. And please go tell everybody about the new book and about AthenaDAO. And we're here for 4 more events. And one of them, as I mentioned, is an amazing panel on Tuesday here again at 6 p.m. Thank you,
Amazing.
Marina.
Thank you so much. Thank you.